Hey guys, you're in for a treat today. I'm hopping on the podcast with Mindrise coach Jennifer Wielage, and we are talking about deepening our connections in relationship. And we're covering all bases from coworkers, or romantic relationships, friendships, family members, and beyond. And interestingly enough, what you're going to learn on this episode is that our relationship with someone else has less to do with two people and more to do with the internal narrative that we have about the other person. So this is really interesting. And I also, in true fashion, throw a couple curveballs to Jen. So you have to listen in on how she solves some of those relationship problems to create those deeper connections. So definitely check us out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, as well as Google Play. And if you haven't already, leave us a positive review. We'd love your feedback. And with that, step in and enjoy the podcast. Okay, so as you might have seen, I posted on Instagram a couple of different options of things for us to talk about, because knowing you and I, we could talk about lots of things for hours and hours, but in the interest of keeping this to podcast episode time. And some of the things that I had posted were about building and cultivating relationships. Second thing was about quieting that voice of doubt in our mind. And the third, which is has been our theme for the month of May for Mindrise, is about believing in possibilities. Now, I know we could talk about all of these things, and I feel like we could weave them all together inevitably. But Jen, I find that one of the most magic parts about you is not only your effervescence, of course, but the way in which you create relationships with people. So I'm kind of leaning toward that for our topic for today.
All right, let's do it. As I thought we were talking about possibilities, but I guess we can talk about possibilities, like you said, in there.
Well, weaving it in
relationships, yeah.
Yeah, well, I do. I like
Sure.
that. I like that angle of talking about the possibilities that reside in relationships, because I think that more often than not, we have a tendency to get stuck in a rut with the relationships. And it's like, here is my family. Here are the friends that I know. And like, here's who they know me to be. And here are my work friends. And I could certainly say that COVID, weeded some friendships out. It happened, brought me closer together with some other people. We created our pods. We also had major changes with work where we weren't going into the workplace as much. So those friendships that were almost like by proximity, and not that they weren't genuine, it was just like a lot of the connection happened by seeing each other, weren't happening as much. And maybe you'll see somebody on Zoom, but I don't know that we were efforting in those work relationships as much necessarily, or maybe again, the possibility of people coming closer together. But I guess a couple of different angles here that I'm thinking. One, kind of giving people an opportunity to check in on the status of their relationships, right? Are those relationships fulfilling or not fulfilling? And maybe you want to talk about even the wheel of life that we use and the scale there, in which we kind of take an overall look at our life. And one of those areas is relationships. And then I would love for you to kind of share a little bit of your secret sauce of how you develop, create, and continue to cultivate relationships that are in your world, whether they're in your work world, friendship world, church world, or life coaching world. So why don't we?
Well, you asked, again, as usual, you ask about 5 questions right off the bat. I love it.
No, I do. I can't help myself.
I definitely have grown in my understanding of how to cultivate relationships in a better way. I think that, I love connection, as I know you do too. We are people that just thrive on connecting. And my ability to connect in a deeper way has been enhanced in the last couple of years, especially since I became a life coach and, going through the training with you and life coach training that I've had, and just practicing and working with clients and hearing things and just helping them has really helped me to become better at relationships. And one of the things that I really found was so important is when I realized that having a relationship is really our thoughts about another person. And when I learned
Okay.
that, it blew my mind. Our relationships are just the thoughts that we have about that person. And you can also think about it, the relationship that we have with ourselves. That's a relationship that depends on our thoughts about ourselves.
Right.
Our relationship with money. It's about our thoughts about money and what that means. So it's all about our thoughts about that person, say. So if I have wonderful thoughts about you, Bailey, which I do, and the more I can conjure up those beautiful thoughts about you, the more I'm going to love you. Okay. If I
Right.
start to have thoughts about you that are negative, and
Hmm.
I get to decide. That's the
Right.
thing I
Right.
think that
Right.
people don't really understand is we get to decide what we think about a person. It's really in our ballpark, like it's in our court, how we want to think about somebody. People are going to be exactly who they are. We can't do anything about them, unfortunately. Like we have the only thing we can do is accept them exactly how they are. Otherwise, we try to control their behavior, and that never works. If it worked, we'd write a book on how to, and we'd make $1 million.
We've been making like $1 billion. Like, here's the book on how to control others.
Yes,
Right.
it would be the #1 best-selling book of all time. And we'd make $1 gazillion and we'd never have to work again. But unfortunately, that is not the case. We will never be able to do that no matter how hard we try. So the one person that we can control is ourselves, and we can control how we think and how we want to feel when it comes to our relationships. So that's
Right.
really helped me.
Yeah. I mean, I can see how that would help you. Of course, I got to throw a couple of questions at you because, and like, if we are remunerating in our mind, right, that this person is a certain way, right, whether it's by way of an expectation that we have or an anxiety that we have, right? New boss, this person's going to be really, really tough on me. Or expectation, I'm in a new relationship. I expect this person to act like this or perform like that or do this. And I hear what you're saying. Like, we are not in control of others. Like, got to put that one on the table and then take it off the table because we're not at the driver's seat of anyone else's life. But I'm curious, like when we are talking about our thoughts, how do our thoughts play in when we either have really high expectations and then our experiences feel like there's a huge gap? And we're like, oh, I expect this person to be like this, but like, oh, they're like that. How do we then not put a guard up? And then, on the other hand here, like if we have anxiety about how we think that someone's going to be, like that difficult boss or, critical sibling or something, and we are almost start either with our defenses up, our shields up, or with like a performance version of ourselves where we're always trying to people please. So can you walk us through like those two different scenarios? Because I could throw a million more scenarios at you, but I know that those are two things that people really struggle with: either the anxiety based on the narrative that they have about somebody else, or the discrepancy between what they expected, right, which was their own narrative, and what they're experiencing.
Yeah, because I always like to kind of think about it like this. All of us have what I call, and I like to refer to as a manual in our head about how others should behave in order for us to feel better.
Mm.
And when we have this manual, which we all do, and there's nothing wrong with having a manual, it's just that we have to be aware that we have one and what are the rules in our book for how others should act.
Right.
And then ask ourselves, is this realistic? Is this something that, we are expecting another person to do in order to make us happy? And once we realize that the only person that can make us happy is ourselves, other people can't make us happy because that's giving them our power. When we give them our power, then we lose our own power and we become at the effect of other people's behaviors.
Right.
So it's good to expect, it's not wrong to expect to be treated a certain way or whatever. And we can have boundaries. When we have boundaries and we have emotional adult, I call it like emotional adulthood, where we are in what adult I can't even say it. Emotional adulthood is the understanding that we and us and us alone are in charge of our feelings, that nobody else could make us feel bad or make us feel sad or make us feel unwanted or make us feel anything. What we think about what they have done is really what is causing our feelings. So once we enter into that emotional adulthood space and we can adopt that belief and understand that we are only the ones that control how we feel, then we let other people off the hook. Then we don't have as much of a rule book for them because we're not looking to feel better by being in someone else's presence. They can act how they want. They can be who they are. We can accept them exactly how they are because we take care of our needs. Like, we get to do that. And that's really hard. I mean, it's not an easy concept to understand, but once we do, it frees us up and it allows us to just be present with the people that we're with and without like, I mean, it's really hard when it comes to family. I know for me, I mean, I was with my mom yesterday. I love her dearly, but yeah, she shouldn't say that. She shouldn't do that. We have so much, that manual is really, really loud in our heads when we're with our family.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so just becoming aware that we have this manual that has all these rules in it and just seeing what those rules are. What should our husband be doing? He should be taking out the garbage. He should be cleaning out the garage. He should be, waking up earlier. He should be listening to me better. He should be taking a walk with me. Well, really, why should he be? Like, let him be who he is. And then your life just becomes so much more, it's just freeing. It's just a more freeing experience when it comes to relationships. So that's how I like to think about that expectation piece.
Right. And what about that desire for connection? So I hear what you're saying about controlling the narrative based on that manual that we have. So let's use the lovely Derek as an example, right? Where you say like, okay, my husband should be taking out the garbage, or he should be buying me a gift, or he should be taking that walk with me. And what if like how you want to connect with him is that time spent? Or that like you have an expectation, I'm just making things up about him, but like that he respect you or pay attention to you, and you're like, what's the deal? Like, this isn't happening. I'm trying to talk to him and he's tuned out. So when we want to deepen our connection with somebody, I hear what you're saying. We have to like remove the manual of expectations, right? And we have to take care of ourselves. But how do we deepen our connection with someone and have our needs met while we're allowing them to fully be themselves, knowing that we can't control them? What is the way in which we can communicate?
Well, I like to decide what it is that my needs are, like really be clear about what my needs are. I think a lot of times, like say couples therapy, they tell you, like tell the other person your needs, and like you try to meet that person's needs and they try to meet yours, and because you don't want to do what they want you to do, and you don't want to do what they want you to do, and they don't want to do what you want them to do. So it's like no one's happy. You're just doing it out of obligation.
Right.
That's a sucky way to, that's not a good way to be in a relationship with somebody. But it is important to know your needs. So what if you were to write down all the things that you want, that you need from a relationship, and have your partner do the same? Now you have all the things that you want to do. I want to go for walks on the beach. I want to go out to dinner twice a week. I want to, like lay on the couch and snuggle for, a couple of
Right.
times a week too. Whatever the thing is, okay? Then your spouse or your partner does the same thing, and you see, like, are there matches? Like, you want to go for a
Sure.
walk, I want to go for a walk. We like that
Yeah.
activity
Ding.
together, right? You like to play golf, I like to play tennis. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to find someone else to play tennis with, or those kind of things. So you see, we call it like the want match. Like, what are the things that you want to do and I want to do too?
Mhm.
But like, yeah, of course, there are, you think like, of course you want your person to listen to your words and like care. But the
Right.
reality sometimes is they don't care.
Right.
So why are we fighting with reality all the time?
Mm.
There are times when my husband just doesn't want to listen to me speak about something that I care about. He just doesn't want to do it. He wants to, you know, he wants to rest, or he wants to read a book, or he wants to do something else. And I want to talk. Then we don't have a want match. I can be mad, or I can just think the reality is he doesn't want to talk right now,
Right.
and really live in that reality. Because when we're trying to force, okay, so then, yeah, maybe I'm hurt. Maybe I am hurt. I wanted to talk to him and he wants to read his book and he's not caring.
Right.
I can fight with that reality. And there's a saying that says you can fight with reality, but you're going to lose only 100% of the time. So like, fighting with that reality is not going to get you closer to that person. It's just going to
Right.
make everything just blow up, right? If I like start to harass him, take the book out of his hands, demand that he listen to me, like, that's not it. So yeah, maybe I'll have my feelings hurt, but that's okay. Like, feelings get hurt. And then maybe, like, I believe in communicating what we need, but if that person is not able to give us what we need at that moment, then we have to somehow take care of ourselves.
Right. 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 And I think you're right, Jen. It goes back to us. We are ultimately responsible for ourselves. We're responsible for our feelings. And when we try to outsource that to someone else, we are going to be disappointed in some respects. I'm not saying that, all people are going to disappoint us at every point in time, but we will be disappointed because we do not control those people. Again, we don't. Right. So you don't control so much as the book that Derek reads, as much as like when he wants to go for a walk. You can communicate what you would want. And if it's a want match, then like perfect. But what about those relationships that there isn't necessarily that rapport or that reciprocity as potentially fluid as a romantic partnership or a friendship? Like, what about those workplace relationships where it's just like, I have to work with this person, even if we have just a different work style or different set of ethics or different beliefs, right? Like, let's talk about the challenging part of like when someone like really gets on your nerves and you're like, I cannot believe I've got to work with this person, right? Whether they are just not in integrity or they're making a project that you're supposed to work on, making it that much more challenging. And you're like, this doesn't have to be an obstacle course. Like, why are you making this hard? Like, can we work together? But when you're running up against that, so how would we navigate that, like that landscape
It's
where,
very similar. It's very similar.
okay, all right,
I mean, relationships are relationships. I mean, yes, when some are romantic and some are professional and some are friendships and everything, but it's all about, it still goes to our thoughts about that person. And also like what we're making, what they're doing mean about us.
Mhm.
Even if we are just working side by side with somebody and they're doing something and we're thinking the thought they shouldn't be doing it, question ourselves, why shouldn't they be doing? That's what they're doing. That's the reality of the situation. We always suffer when we try to change the reality.
Mm.
We cannot always change it. Most of the time we can't control or change the reality, but we can change the way we think about it.
Right, right, right.
So,
And
I mean, in your example of coworkers, like the thoughts, like, I can't believe they're doing it this way, and this kind of thing. It's like, well, guess what? That's the reality of the situation. So like, how can I like change my thoughts about how they're doing it. You know, this is that person and this is the way they're doing it. And how can I, you know, maybe add my own 2 cents to the, you know, to the project, or how maybe I can, you know, talk to somebody, or maybe I can just ask them, be curious, like, why are you doing it that way? I'm just curious. Like, maybe you'll learn something from that person. But, you know, we suffer when we fight against the reality of what is going on. And it is, a lot of it is how we're thinking about it.
Right. It's funny, like, Jen, I love you to death. And I know that I see you, my internal narrative view is that you're much nicer than I am. Me, it's like, sometimes I have this streak within me that I get mad about it. And I'm like, and I tried and I efforted and it's still not coming together. It's still not working. And I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I have that, like, I call it my, like, flip a table. I have not actually flipped a table, but, like, it's my flip a table little energy that I get in me sometimes. And I hear what you're saying. It's like, okay, well, hold on. Like, what would allow you to be curious about them? And I do want to take the high road, but sometimes, I mean, and I'm just
Can
talking.
you give me an example?
Like, please give me an example of that. Because I know that I'm definitely, like, for everyone who's listening, they probably have had those moments where they're just like, WTF. So an example where it's like, we're working on a project and we're working to move that project forward. And there's an agreement and a shared vision. But yet at every turn, this person is like doubting or throwing a wrench or slowing things down. And it feels like almost sabotagey in nature. And despite, like, having the conversation of like, hey, let's come back to this shared vision. Oh, like, let's come back to this shared mission that we're doing. It feels so sabotagey that at some point, like, I get that little, I mean, it's not my favorite part of myself, but I'm like, okay, well, I got this spunk for a reason. And when my spunk is used for good enough for evil, it's much better. But I'm just kind of like, WTF? Like, if you don't want to be here, there's the door. Like, clearly, like, you're sabotaging me. I'm trying to create relationship with you and you're not meeting me in any capacity. And that gives me that, like, want to flip a table energy, which does nothing. It improves nothing. It's just that, like, grrr. And for me, like, now that I'm a grown adult and I don't flip tables, not that I ever have, but that's usually when I see that my narrative and my emotions are in overdrive and that I'm way more emotionally reactive to it than I am, like, operating with any logic. That's usually when I, like, pause for the cause, say I need to revisit something. I'll go take a walk. I'll grab a glass of water. I'm an extrovert. I love relationships. So I have a tendency to, like, I'll either journal it out, but I really have a tendency to be like, I need to talk it out and, like, emotionally, verbally express, like, oh, this is what happened and that was what happened. And usually through talking it out, I can gain a little bit more of my power back, or even my level-headedness. But I know I'm in good company. It's like when you're just met with that brick wall and you're like, I don't know how to change something that doesn't, like, is not changing. And I'm seeing the reality of, like, what is happening here.
Mm.
So that's a
I think
example.
yeah, I think, like, also getting curious as to why it's bothering you so much. It's like, why? I love curiosity. I think
Right.
it's really a great thing to, a great, I guess, emotion, right? Curious, just to be curious and, like, really ask yourself, like, why are you getting so upset? Like, what are you making this mean about you?
Right.
Which is a really good question to ask anytime there's, somebody is doing something and we're like, is it like I'm making this mean something about me, or am I afraid? Am I afraid that this is going to reflect bad on me? Or what is this all about? And, like, maybe just, like, being curious with yourself and understanding why you feel the way you do, getting curious with that person as to like why they're doing the things that they are doing in a curious way. Though there's a difference between being curious and being confrontational, right?
Right.
Like,
Good
just curious.
differentiation. Yeah.
Why are you doing it this way? I'm like really curious. Like I never thought, because maybe that person has a really good reason why they're
Right.
doing it that way. And maybe it isn't to sabotage, or maybe that they don't know any different, they don't know how to do it. Maybe they need your help, so we'd never know. We'd never get to the answer until we have that curious, you know, just curious behavior, like
Right.
that's
Right.
not the word, but curiosity
Right.
would help in that situation, I would think, just to like
Right.
really try to understand.
Well, and then I want to throw my psychotherapy hat on for a second, because you asked an important question, like, what am I making it mean about me? Now, in some instances, especially if like the relationship or the cause are very important to me, then when I get to that point, and it doesn't happen often, but when I get to that point, what I realize is that what I'm experiencing, and I'm sure lots of people who are listening, that they've also experienced this, is that it's called emotional flooding, where like the emotions are rolling through me quicker than I can, with my skill
Unpack.
set at hand, unpack them. Now, we could really throw the psychotherapy hat on and like get in our DeLorean to go back in time of like, when did that start? Or, was there a particular trauma or traumatic event or a rearing in which you didn't feel heard or seen, or an event over time? Like we could go, back in time. But I think that, seeing as we work in the field of coaching, we're not delving into past psychodynamics. We could say like, oh, I was the youngest of 5 and I was never listened to, whatever it is. I think that it goes back to what you're saying before, Jen, like, how can I take care of myself? And what I love to argue is like, how can I know myself well enough to know that how I'm reacting is not how I want to react, or that it's truly just a reaction. So when I'm in an emotional flooding, it's hard to get curious because all of my defenses have come up. And sometimes, like, written on the wall of my defenses are wanting to be right. And that's not like you're wrong and I'm right. It's just if I'm right, I have worth. Right. That's what's like written on the wall of defenses. Or people pleasing. I want everybody to be happy. Or perfection. Right. So when we get that emotional flood where we are feeling like our wall is coming up, whether it's the overwhelm or an unwillingness to communicate or get curious on the other side, and I've experienced it. So and you're like,
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being angry. There's
right.
nothing wrong with being frustrated. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with being upset or mad, but like that is allowing ourselves to feel those things
Mhm.
when we're going through it is such an important component to it. We're not like, I don't want to be like, oh, just change your thoughts and like you'll be happy. Like,
Right.
no, you might be frustrated but realize you're frustrated because you're thinking that this person shouldn't be doing it this way. They should be doing it a different way. That's why, like, if we could just understand that, and that's like part of being, like I said, the emotional adult who gets that it's not that person, it's their thoughts about them. It's
Right.
not the person doing that thing, it's their thoughts about they're doing that thing.
Yes, it's causing the
Getting
reaction.
so upset. But just allowing yourself to be upset, allowing yourself to be frustrated, allowing yourself to be, pissed off. I mean, all those things are just part of being a human being.
Right.
We need to embrace all of that as being a human. Like I don't know what kind of person we would be if we were just like happy all the time. Like that's just part of being a human, and like good for you that you're human. And don't try to like change that. Sometimes you are frustrated because you're thinking that they shouldn't be doing it like that. And that's okay.
Right.
Just allow yourself that mercy to be like frustrated because it's part of the human experience.
Right. And I can definitely cop to that as well. Like sometimes I get frustrated that I'm frustrated. And then because my narrative is like, you shouldn't be frustrated.
Yeah.
You should see all the sides. Like, don't you know what you do for a living? Right. It's just like all
Yeah.
that.
We get mad at ourselves for being mad.
Right. Yes. I'm mad that I'm mad.
I shouldn't be mad. I'm frustrated because I'm frustrated.
Right. Because
Shouldn't be
feeling happy
frustrated.
is so much better in my body. My body likes happy so much more than mad. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
No, I
Absolutely.
think that I call it the balance of emotions, right? Like we want to feel it all.
Mhm.
And because that, like I say, the goal is not to be happy all the time. The goal is to be human. And I
Right.
think when we think that our goal is to be happy all the time, and when we're in a relationship and we're frustrated, then we think it's the relationship. We don't realize that
Right.
it's just the way that I say God, the universe created us to be in a human body with human emotions, and
Mhm.
relationships aren't always supposed to make you happy.
Right.
They're supposed to make you frustrated sometimes. Well, they don't, we do. We do that to ourselves. But it's
Sure.
okay. Like that's part of it. But just realizing that it's not that person or what they're doing that's causing you to be upset. It's your thought about it. And you could change it, or you could just be mad, and that's fine too.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, and I love that you're making it that simple. Like that's fine too. Like it's okay to be mad. Right. And I've actually given clients this reference before, and I said like our emotions that we have, especially mad, it's a place that we visit. It's not a place that we live. Like if you thought about like your favorite restaurant, you wouldn't like take
Hmm.
your pillow and forward your mail and be like, well, I'm gonna go live at Sea to Sprout now. And it's like, yep,
I
just
would
sent my
like
mail
to.
here. I know. It's so good. So delicious. But yeah, we have to understand that it's safe, because I think that that's one of the reasons why we try to avoid, you know, anger or frustration or sadness is because it doesn't feel safe for us, because we are trying to uphold the narrative that we're supposed to be happy all the time. And it's not
Right.
realistic. Our emotional state's more like an accordion, right? It goes in and goes out, and we've got a range, right?
Right.
But
But we think we're supposed to be happy. It's a mistake in thinking. It's a thought error. We're not, just public service announcement. You're not supposed to be happy all the
all the
time.
time. Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
supposed to be happy. Sometimes great.
Right.
We welcome it all. But like the thing is, like, again, if you have that rule book in your head, even at work, whether it's the work thing, it's the friend thing, like my belief is that my friend should be at the restaurant at 12 o'clock when we have a lunch date. Like
Oh
we
yeah.
agree at 12, she needs to be there at 12. But guess what? My friend is always late. And it's not just you. Probably thinking I'm talking about you. And yeah, when you are late, it's like, what do I make that mean about me?
Yeah.
She doesn't respect me. She doesn't value my time.
Right. Right.
She
Right.
doesn't care about me. If she really, all those things, that's what I'm making it mean. So then, of course, I get upset.
Right.
Or I could just think, that's Bailey being Bailey. Oh, Bailey's on island time. That's her, it has nothing to do with me, but I get mad when I
Right.
think that it has something to do with me. And
Yeah.
I would say 99.9% of the things that we get mad at people about has nothing to do with us.
Right. Right. Right.
And
It's
even that
so
like small percent that doesn't really help us to like, you know, think that somehow, we did something to cause it. Like it never helps us to think that. It's the person, they do what they are doing, and then we
yeah.
get to decide what we make of it. So
Right. Well, that's so funny you bring this up, because literally just 2 nights ago, I'm sitting with friends having a conversation about this late thing. And both of them were very, very adamant that being late or not on time means that you are, just like you said, that list. And they said that they don't respect your time, they don't respect you, they don't care, they're selfish. I mean, like, and I was like shrinking at the table. And I just, because I was like, wow, I'm two, voices that I value. I'm like, wow, like sometimes you guys would really think like that's intense to have those feelings. And for me, like, well, one, I tend to run behind on time, and my experience, and we call it island time because I usually living on an island somewhere. But yeah, it's island time. But I also get really into whatever I'm doing. And inevitably I pick my head up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be over here. Right. Because I have such a love for life, and whatever I'm doing, whether it's like I'm chopping a cantaloupe or I'm talking to a friend, I'm so engaged in it.
So in your head, it's love for life, and in their head, disrespecting.
Yes.
You
And I'm
know?
like, God,
And
I don't
so
want to live like that.
yeah. So this is what we do to our relationships. You have zero, thought about it being something, you're not
No
disrespecting
malice.
anybody.
No.
Right. No malice. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that if we can just really take our power back and see that we have so much control over how we think
Right.
about our relationships and about the people in our lives. Like even the annoying, mother-in-law, whoever it is, like allowing them to just be who they are is like the biggest gift, because they allow us to be how we are. Right.
I mean, for the most part, but my friends on Friday night, they were not happy. But it's funny because then they said, but that doesn't apply to you because I know that you are, busy with this or doing that. And so it goes back to what you're saying, Jen, about that space of curiosity. Like instead of like automatically thinking that that person is a jerk for not being on time, like for me, I always think, well, one, they're probably like really into whatever they're doing. Two, I always go to like, are they okay? Like did something happen along the way? Things happen, like that's life. I also kind of give everybody like a 10-minute grace period before I start to like, put your face on a poster and worry that you're missing an action. But yeah, they then shared that they have an acceptance of me, but I'm like, but that's because you know me. And how do we get to know someone? It's through that curiosity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than judge. We're so quick to
looking at our
judge.
rule books about people and
Mhm.
how they should be and shouldn't be.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
really, I mean, I cannot tell you, how many rules I had from my husband about how he should act. I had so many in my head. And I wrote them all down, and doing so helped me to see what they were. And then I went through them and I said, okay, is this true? Does he have to take out the garbage? Does that mean that he loves me? And if he doesn't take out the garbage, he doesn't love me? Is that true? Does he have to tell me I'm beautiful every day, or he doesn't think I'm beautiful? Like,
Right.
how much of it is just what we like are just making, deciding that, this is what this means. If he does this, he loves me. If he doesn't do this, he doesn't love me,
Right.
and just
right.
to look at that and see like, okay, what are those rules that I'm having? And like, what do I want to keep? And what do I want to like not worry about anymore?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so, yeah, I think that has helped me so much. And also just realizing that other people don't make me anything. I'm doing it to me, which is like, people are like, oh, that's like blaming the victim or whatever. It's like, no, it's giving you all the power.
Mm-hmm.
When you know that it's not that other person,
Right.
it's like the best news ever. Because
Right.
then you can decide how you want to interpret that or think about it.
Right. 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 No, Jenna, I think you hit the nail on the head. It does. It comes down to what your narrative is and what you're, again, making it mean about you. Something else that you brought up that I want to touch on before we wrap up is about boundaries, right? Because you had talked about communication and you've talked about boundaries. So, I mean, let's go there. In some relationships that either fall away, they happen, or relationships that we need to make a conscious choice, that we need to either communicate really strong boundaries or that we need to sever that relationship because the boundaries are constantly like being either crossed or violated or not respected. So I'm curious. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Curious.
Well, no, I'm curious. I'm curious. The word of today. But I'm curious, like, have you ever had to navigate something like this? Where do your boundaries come from? Are those boundaries like the same with each and every relationship that you have? I imagine not. And like, what does happen when a relationship either needs to fall away or it needs to shift or pivot? Because I will say, and I know I'm putting this on as like the addendum. I know you're trying to like memorize all my questions. But the addendum is I've found, and I'm curious for you in your own development, as well as your clients that you've worked with, sometimes when we are working on ourselves and we are really in that growth trajectory, it could be triggering to people around us. And while we have shared that we're not in charge of being like, well, you could grow too, or read this book too. And they are just like, oh, personal development, this is like, snake oil garbage. Like that sometimes if we have people in our life that, there's a toxic connection or a disconnection, sometimes we need to just move them a little bit further outside of our circle. And that could be painful. So I'd love you to answer all of those questions. But have you ever had this experience? Do you see it when people are in a growth trajectory? What does it mean to communicate our boundaries? And, what does it look like when we have to either sever or shift a relationship?
Well, boundaries are interesting because some boundaries we speak and we tell the person, this is what our boundary is. Like, if you do this, then I will. It's really a boundary is just telling the person what you're going to do if they do something that crosses the line.
Right.
But like a boundary is not like, if you don't take out the garbage to my husband, that's not a boundary. Like a boundary is like someone's invading your like physical space or your emotional space in a way that's, you need to protect yourself. So it's either spoken or unspoken. And there are many unspoken boundaries that we have for ourselves. Like, I'm not going to tell you every boundary I have for you, but if you take, if you start smoking in my house or something, that's a boundary that I haven't told you because I just imagined that you wouldn't just be lighting up in my house. But there are things that just come up that are encroaching on a boundary that we have for ourselves that we never said to that person. So there are spoken boundaries, unspoken boundaries, and we don't have to tell everybody every single boundary that we have, right? Like I don't tell my husband, like, if you beat me, I will leave you, because it's just like pretty much, just
an
something
unspoken boundary.
Unspoken boundary, but yeah, I would say like it is very important to have those boundaries because, we need to take care of ourselves. Somebody wants, to do like somebody takes the pen off my desk. Some people would not mind. Other people, this would be like a boundary intrusion. They would, get very upset. You stole my pen, but like other people. So we need to know what our boundaries are, like what we kind of like will accept, will not accept in our lives. Once we know that, then we can either, we can tell people as if they breach that boundary. We can, say, I have a boundary around this and I don't allow this. And if you do this again, then this will be the consequence. And then it's that following through.
Right. That's the hardest part.
The following through is the hardest part. Because if you say to somebody, listen, if you, yell at me, I'm going to have to leave the room, and you stay, or then you start yelling back, or whatever the case may be, then you're not really upholding your boundary.
Right.
You're allowing that person. So boundaries are really, really important and really, really something that you have to be very clear on. And a lot of people don't know where their boundaries are. Like that's like a thing that I noticed, in my own life too. Like, sometimes I'm not even sure. I'm like, that feels like you just crossed a line, and I never thought about that being like a boundary in my life. So it is an interesting, area to explore. Like, what are my boundaries, and like, what do I do if somebody, does such and such? But I think,
but we can't expect other people to know what our boundaries are. I mean, to your very simple example, somebody moves your pen, Jen, you might not care at all. But for me, if somebody moves my pen, maybe I would get upset about it. I wouldn't, but it could be that, and we don't necessarily know what someone else's boundaries are, right? So if you have a boundary, it is up to you to communicate that to the other person. I think that it's not fair, and it's detrimental in relationships when someone's either crossed a boundary or they touched upon a boundary that there was never a conversation around. And like you said, sometimes we don't know what those boundaries are until they get bumped up against. But then, at least in my mind, when it comes to relationship, that's an opportunity for a conversation, right? That's an opportunity to connect deeper and say, hey, when you did that, it really upset me. I didn't expect that you were going to do that, and
right. But we don't do that. We
no.
hold it inside and ruminate about it.
Oh,
Talk to our other friends about, can you believe what this so-and-so person did? And like, that's where disconnection comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, people are going to cross boundaries. They don't even realize they're crossing. And you never maybe even realize that it was a boundary that you had, but then it was sparked. And then you're like, okay.
Right.
And then your job then is to just communicate that to the person in a way that, it doesn't even have to be a big deal. Just say, I don't like people taking pens off my desk. Please don't do that. Like that's it.
Right.
But we don't communicate sometimes as well as we could, like that's another whole thing. It's like communicating what we need, what we want. It's great. We can communicate all day long. What I was saying before is just don't necessarily expect that everyone is going to act like you want them to act or do what you want them to do. You can have expectations all day long, but you're going to suffer all day long too. You're going to suffer all day long because you have these expectations and this person's not meeting them and you're thinking they must not love me and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, but boundaries are super important to, communicate to people and also just like have them for yourself. I mean, like, and really, I think recognize what they are. If we don't really, like for instance, can you tell me one of like your boundaries? Like what's an important boundary for you?
Oh, I could definitely tell you this. So it's not about the pen, but if someone touches my stuff and moves it and doesn't let me know, or like back in the day, I have two sisters. So back in the day, and you have sisters too. If one of my sisters borrowed something, it's not so much that you borrowed it. It's that I've just spent X amount of time looking for it, thinking I'm crazy. So now I'm mad about it. Like that would definitely be a good example. It's just like, well, just tell me that you did it or that you wanted to do it. Just let me know in advance. But it would really grate on me.
So how would the boundary go if you were talking to your sisters?
Well, I'd probably say, because both of them are, I'm like, can't necessarily pick one that was worse with borrowing stuff. But they're both, and I borrow their things as well, but just, hey, next time you want to borrow such and such, I need you to let me know. And I don't mind if you borrow things from me, not if they have tags on them, because I haven't worn it yet, but if you want to borrow something, I just need you to text me or call me in advance because I don't want to feel crazy looking for it. And if you don't do that, right, then I'm not going to be able to lend you things going forward in the future.
Right. That's a perfect example of how to communicate a boundary.
Right.
And so if we can get good at that, and it's basically just, if you do this, I'm going to have to do this.
Right. And then, like you said, following through on it.
Yeah.
See, but Jen, and as we wrap up, I think this makes such a great case for coaching because to your point, sometimes we don't know what our boundaries are and we need to flush those out. Like you said, all these expectations that you had in your marriage and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't actually know what those rules were that I had until I wrote them out, right? And that's why I think that coaching is so powerful because we have that +1 in our corner to say, hey, this is what's going on for me. And at least in my experience of being somebody who is both a coach as well as getting coached, it allows me to put on new lenses and look at it a little bit differently than that, merry-go-round of thoughts that we can sometimes just get stuck as like the record skipping on my like shitty thinking. Right. which just lends itself, as we know, self-talk cycle. So if I think like crap, I feel like crap, I act like crap, and it just goes on and on. And then I'm wondering why I'm so frustrated or stuck or feeling disconnected from others.
Yeah, it really, really matters what, how you, in our relationships. And like I said in the beginning, what we think about another person is the relationship. Really, really getting that is so important. I just think about real quick, my
Yes.
dog, I think about my dog in a home, and I just lost him. So I'm devastated. But, how I used to think about him. He's so perfect. This is what I always used to say. He's the perfect dog. He's amazing. Look at that face. Like everything I ever said about my dog, like I never said anything bad about him ever. I had such a good relationship with my dog. I loved him so much. It was coming from all the good thoughts I had about him.
Right.
I try to do the same with my husband. I'm not always as successful, but I try to conjure up good thoughts about my husband, because there are a lot of bad thoughts I could think about him. But
Sure.
it's not going to help our marriage. It's not going
Right.
to help our relationship. It's going to make our relationship suck. So
Right.
I just try to think about him in a way that's, I look at all the good and I try to think about him in good ways and not focus on all the other stuff, because let's face it, we all have good and we all have bad. And wouldn't it be beautiful to just grace everybody that we meet with just good thoughts,
Right.
about them? And that's love. To me, that's love. And love feels amazing in our bodies. So we need to love more. When we feel angry at somebody, we're not giving them our anger. We're feeling it. It's happening in
Right.
our bodies. We're the ones suffering. So why would we do that to ourselves?
Right. No.
Someone else. Unconditional love is so good for us.
Right.
Because it feels better in our bodies to love. And so
that's what we have to say about that.
I just recommend loving unconditionally because it feels so good. And
Right.
it's so much better than feeling all those, angry feelings and frustrated feelings. I mean, we can experience them, that's part of being a human, like I said before, but
Right.
it's also feels so much better to love. And what does love produce?
Right. Absolutely. Connection.
Yeah.
And we're not making a case for being blind to abuse or negligence or disrespect. No, absolutely not. But just
that's where boundaries come in big time.
Right. And
so boundaries and emotional intelligence together, where you're taking responsibility for how you feel and having boundaries at the same time, that's the recipe for beautiful relationships. Right.
Awesome. And don't give our friends a hard time when they're late. Just get curious. Don't judge them. Don't judge our friends. Oh my gosh, Jen, I always love jamming with you on the podcast. So thank you to everybody for listening today. And Jen, our coach, Jen Wielage, you are absolutely fabulous. And we will catch you on the Insta stories. Bye.